unable to join us live, they will have access to that. All right, again, good morning and welcome to Technology and Branding. I am extremely excited to have Rose McKinney with us today to talk about this important topic. A lot of businesses are very nervous about technology and how it plays into their brand, and Rose is going to be a great resource for us today. My name again is Jennifer Radke. I'm the CEO of the National Institute for Social Media, and I look forward to kind of co-hosting this conversation with us today. We are going to keep it to 1 hour, and we will encourage you all to ask questions. So if you do have questions along the way, please put them in the chat bar. I will be checking in there to ensure that everybody is getting their questions answered. All right. I guess what we'll do here is we'll start with a quick introduction. I'd like to introduce Rose and tell you a little bit more about her.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rose. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
So Rose has more than 30 years of strategic communications experience and has helped hundreds of organizations, from startups to international conglomerates and nonprofits, tap into the power and potential of brand and reputation. I have had the pleasure to know Rose for several years, and I've even been able to guest lecture in one of her classes. And it is fantastic to have somebody with Rose's experience and background with us today. She's worked in a variety of public relations, advertising, and marketing agencies. And then in 2011, Rose launched Pineapple RM, a communications firm focused on generating results that matter for clients. Rose has been featured on television, radio, and print, offering insights on personal branding for business executives. She's also been teaching, as I mentioned, as an adjunct professor at Metropolitan State University since 2005, and that's located here in Minnesota. So, Rose, welcome. Anything else you'd like to share with the group about you and your background?
I'm super glad to be here, Jen, and similarly, we've had the opportunity to work with Jen and her team on some social media components for our clients and education. And so it's just great to collaborate and both share some perspectives on social media technology and brands. Let's get going.
All right, let's get going. I'll let you take it from here. I think you've got the first piece of content here, Rose.
All right. Well, the first question I'm going to ask people, and to think about this, is what time is it? It is maybe one of the simplest questions you can think of, and today you could glance quickly at your laptop, at your Fitbit, at your smartphone, at a clock on the wall, at a clock in your car. There's so many different ways to know what time it is, and it's a question that we've been asking since the beginning of time. People used to look at the sunset, the sunrise, and they would know evening from day. They'd look at the passage of days and years and times. And as things became more and more sophisticated, there were more and more ways to know what time it was. Well, time can be very complicated. I won't confess to say that I know how a clock works with all those gears and all those little springs and things. But with technology, you really don't need to know how the clock works or even what makes it tick. But what you do need to know is what technology can do for you. So just like we can't necessarily know how to make our watch work or why it works, we know what time it is and we trust in it. So the same is true for technology. And we're going to talk about that today because we really want people to become less afraid of technology and social media and more confident in what it can do for them and for their brands. So our agenda today is threefold. We're going to take a trip back to 101 and look at what is brand and reputation and why is that important. Jen and I are going to share some insights on technology and social media, things that might help you put things in perspective and make decisions for your organization or for yourself. And then we're going to give you some next steps in terms of how to move forward and think about applying this to the work that you do. All right. So as Jen said, we both spend quite a bit of time in the classroom. And it's always fun to just get people on the same page. I'll often ask my students to define what is brand, what is reputation, what is marketing, what's advertising, what's public relations. And as they go around and give answers, a couple of things happen. Some people share a textbook definition. They've learned it in a class, or they maybe share their own definition that they have gleaned from experience or from the work that they do. But interestingly, when I really dig in and ask about brand and reputation, and I say, ask your mom what these things are. And you know what? The moms know. Moms know that brand is really about what you say you're going to do. It's about what people expect. And that reputation is whether or not people believe it. And boy, oh boy, you don't want to mess with it. So when I'm going to advance our slide here, maybe. Jen, I'm not able to get this to move forward.
All right, there we go.
Oh, thank you very much. When we think about brand, relationships, and reputation, I like to think about the pyramid. And your brand begins with understanding mission, vision, values, your audience, your objectives, all those things that are strategic to what your organization is about. And that's the foundation. You have to have that foundation in order to get into the things that are more distinct or differentiating about your brand. A brand also has an identity component to it. And that's what people generally think of when you ask about brands. They think about the logo, they think about a tagline, maybe they think about something that they have heard. And so brands also have an identity level. And then ultimately, brands have an experiential level. And that's where people see and hear and interact and engage with your brand. And it used to be fairly simple. There was print or there was broadcast, and then we got the website. And now with mobile and with social media, brands are everywhere. So that's why it's so important to have a good understanding of branding and reputation before you jump in. So one of the simplest ways to think about it, your brand is your promise. When you put a brand out there, you are making a promise. This is what people can expect. You're setting up an idea of what they're going to interact with and experience. Then, based on all the different relationships that your brand has, these people are sharing that promise. They're telling other people about it. They are describing their experience. And then finally, as people have those experiences, they decide if you kept your promise. So we make a promise, share a promise, and keep a promise. We want to try to have alignment between the promise that you make and the promise that you keep. Because if those are not in alignment, that's when you end up in a sticky situation, and that's when you have negative headlines, or that's when things go crazy on social media. So the more that you can know about your brand foundation as an organization, as an identity, as an experience, the more you can know about your audiences or all the different relationships, the better chance you're going to have that the reputation is going to line up with the brand. And as we'll talk about as this webinar continues, having alignment there is going to be really key. So when an organization goes through a branding process, and many of you may have participated in some of these, it's a lot like taking disparate information from all over the place. There may be intake sessions, you may participate in workshops or focus groups or interviews, you may look at competitive environment. You're going to look at a whole bunch of different pieces. And you try to take all of these disparate parts and find themes and find commonalities and find really the essence. And so branding will come back and it will show up in the form of a platform. It might be some sort of brand statement with message pillars. You may hear the term creative brief. A lot of times when an organization is embarking on a new piece. Yeah. I hear a little bit of noise going on, so a reminder to mute. You may have some sort of key messaging matrix that lays out, this is our brand message, and these are the main ideas that support that and the anecdotes. And you may have some sort of creative brief that asks questions. Why are we communicating? Who are we communicating with? What do we know about the people we're communicating with? Where will we find them? Where will we engage? And most importantly, what do we want them to do with our communication? And then ultimately, if you're developing a new brand, you'll probably have some sort of rollout or recommendations on how to get that brand out into the marketplace. And chances are it's going to include a social media component. Jen, we've got.
Sorry.
I'm gonna pull this. No problem.
There you go.
All right. So with a brand, it's often a good idea, and this works well for individuals as well. Personal branding is a big deal these days, particularly as people think about their careers and how they want to be perceived. But it's a good idea to have some sort of brand positioning statement. Now, brand positioning statement is generally not something that is used verbatim, but it's used to get your thoughts in order and to think about what you want to say. And so it gives that consistency in terms of what people can expect. We've supplied an example here, it's a fill in the blank, and it's the idea of saying for, and that would be your audience, for people who, and you describe them, our organization, our product, our service, or even yourself, is, give it a little bit of description, that, maybe provide, so that. And what we're trying to get at, what do you do better, and why does it matter? That's really getting at the essence of a brand. So branding versus reality. Jen, do you want to jump in here with some of the key questions that you might ask in terms of the brand promise that you make versus the reality of the brand promise that you keep?
Absolutely. And Rose, you mentioned this earlier, you know, what that promise that you make, you have to make sure that everything you're doing reinforces that. And so as you're looking at your positioning and your reality, you have to really make sure that you are constantly on point with what you're telling people your promise is or what your statement is. And whether or not your customers are actually experiencing you in the same way that you want them to. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. When we look at the benefits of technology, we have a huge opportunity here to see what they are saying about us online. What are the words that they use when they talk about our brands? How does that relate to what we want for our branding position to be? Or how is it different? Because how they're perceiving us really is what our ultimate reputation is all about. And so we need to take a look. What are they saying about us online? Where are they talking about us? Because that also gives us insights into if we think our audience is big in one area or really focuses on a certain platform for communication and use, but they're not there talking about us, then that should tell us something about who our audience is and whether or not we're reaching the audience that we were intending to. And we also need to think about that positioning in reality as far as how should we or could we be responding to the conversations that are happening via technology platforms. Some we should be definitely responding to, those positive reactions, those customer concerns, those questions that we can help to answer. But we may also decide that there are certain people who are out there who are trying to stir the pot, so to speak, and those may not warrant the same attention as those who are truly experiencing our brand. So we got to ask our audience and ourselves, how should we and could we respond via the technology that we have available to us?
Those are really important questions. You'll notice this morning that we're going to pose lots of questions. We're not necessarily going to give answers because the answers are all going to be the things that you would know about your own organization and its products and services or about yourself. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that one of the tools that we use in the branding process is a creative brief. And so we've supplied some questions that often go into that creative brief when you're thinking about how you're going to get your brand out there and get your messages out there. And I think these are particularly important with social media. So some of the questions really get at the basics. Why are we communicating? What is it that we want our audience to know? And what do we want the communications to do? Do we want them to inform? Do we want them to move somebody to action? Do we want somebody to share this information? And generally with social, we're very interested in shares and likes and engagement. We'll also ask in a creative brief, who are we talking to? The more you know about your audience, the better your communications and your branding is going to be tailored to their interests and their needs. And the cool thing with social media is because you can engage, you can begin to get a better sense of who you are talking to, what they like, what they respond to, what their networks are like. We also would ask, what do we know about them that will help us? So in doing some of that social media listening, and Jen's going to get into that in a few minutes, and in watching patterns and participating in the conversations yourself, we'll be able to get some insights. Branding is also about having a key idea. Can you boil it down to something central and then knowing why that idea is credible? Because the more authenticity that you bring to it, the more honesty, the more truth, the more it's going to have credibility out there, and also the more that people will feel comfortable sharing it because they believe in it. We'll also ask, why are we having these conversations? Where are those conversations taking place? There are all different kinds of platforms, and we'll find that the users on one platform don't necessarily use another platform, and so we can hit different audiences in different channels. And then we also need to ask, when are they going to be most receptive and interested in engaging? So some people use their Twitter feed first thing in the morning. It's a quick glance at what's going on, but they dig in more on Facebook later in the evening, or maybe they're constantly checking Instagram throughout the day. So clues about when a target audience is using a platform can also really help you with determining where you're going to place your brand message. It's also really important to involve the team. So Jen, a few words on that?
Yeah,
More
absolutely.
questions.
And I think, Rose and I probably would agree with our experience. There's never been a more important time or a more open time for businesses to actually involve more members of the organization when it comes to things like communicating our brand out there with the world. We used to be very siloed. You had your communications team that was in charge of internal and external communications. You had your marketing team who put together our sales flyers and our advertisements. And then you had your sales team who took the calls and made those sales into happy customers, right? But now, because of technology, we've evolved and been able to include more people at the table and in the conversations that are happening both offline and online. So one of the things that I would encourage, and I'll let Rose give her 2 cents on this as well, but one of the things that I would encourage is to take a look at your organization and figure out, when it comes to technology and really communicating with your audience, who should be involved. Personally, at the National Institute for Social Media, we encourage an inclusive approach, but you also have to know how those people that you want to include should be involved. Not everybody is going to have the same comfort level or skill set as the other person in the room. And so how should we engage our employees or our staff folks to have these conversations about our brands? And then even within that conversation, you look internally as well as externally and say, who are those brand advocates that we already have? Those people who are busy talking about our brand in a positive way, whether they've been asked to or in most cases not, so that we can really reach out to those people and thank them for their involvement and also give them direction about some of the ways that we want our brand to be perceived, especially if they are not necessarily sending the message that we want them to. So I think those conversations need to expand past marketing and public relations and communications and really talk about who is the whole team within our organization and how can each individual contribute and what are the best ways for those individuals to contribute.
Great points, Jen. I would agree with all of them in terms of having a really broad cross-section of folks that are involved in thinking about your social media communication and your branding. It's so important to know how people interact with the key audiences, and that's everyone from the person who greets them at a front desk to the person that answers questions on a helpline to a sales personnel to a leader that's out in the community and sharing the vision. And so when we understand all the different people that are interacting and sharing the brand message, we also want to get their perspective and thinking about the social media usage and how they can be involved. And keeping in mind that they are also consumers and users of social media. I'm always pleased when I see leaders of organizations that use their personal accounts as well as the business accounts. We have a manufacturing client, and the president of that organization is frequently putting things out, and it also allows then the organization to have a human face in addition to a corporate message. And so the combination of that social media interaction is really helpful in terms of that keep a promise and make a promise.
Absolutely.
So let's wrap up a little bit on brand stories, and I'm going to give you the trifecta. There's so many different components to branding. As you know, you could spend an entire semester, you could spend an entire graduate degree learning about brand, but the trifecta here is really when you develop the brand and you think through all the different components and you put together brand statements and creative briefs and involve the team, you're really trying to come up with three things. You want something that is distinct, something that you can own that talks about the difference that you make. It needs to be relevant to the people that are key to your organization. It needs to be important to them, and that needs to be able to adapt because relevance changes. But it also has to be consistent, and that's one of the nice things about social media is you have the opportunity to consistently send out a brand message so that people hear it multiple times and see it, and that they always have a consistent experience. So distinct, relevant, and consistent, that's the checklist for a strong and healthy brand. And the three questions that help you get at those things: what do you do? What do you do better? And why does it matter? Three simple questions. It's not simple to come up with the answers. It takes some hard work and some thoughtfulness, but when you can boil it down to those things and you can keep conveying that in all of your social media messaging, your brand is going to be strong and healthy online. So I mentioned earlier, and Jen's going to go into more details, and note there are more questions as well as some suggestions on things to do. The questions really are the answers, but listening. Before you begin communicating, start by listening. So Jen, what is social listening?
Yeah, my first caution to anyone who is going, oh gosh, what is this listening thing? I've never heard of it, or I've heard of it, but it scares me to death. The first caution that I have is take a deep breath. We are going to try to keep this simple and avoid overwhelm. So social media, as I alluded to earlier, has an immense amount of data and opportunities for us to really kind of get to know our consumers and really understand what it is we can do better and how we can support them better. But if we spend all day looking at this huge funnel of data and don't really have a plan as to where to start or what it is we're trying to hear, we're going to become overwhelmed. And so when you think about social listening, I really encourage businesses who haven't included this before to start with a plan. And that plan might be simply asking one question, which is, what question are you hoping to answer? Look for something specific. And maybe it might be as simple as, who are my customers? what's important to them, right? And so that you might go out intentionally looking to find that answer to that question. And then as you evolve and grow, you may decide, you know what, that's really not the question anymore. I understand who my audience is, but I need to focus a little bit more on how I can better serve them or how I can help them with the next stage of their buyer's engagement with our institution. So there's a whole lots of ways to dive into this, but I would say start simple and figure out what question you're hoping to answer. Then, when we think about social media and all of technology, I'm sure many of you have seen the infographic that shows all of the different social media platforms that are out there worldwide, and there are more than 3,000 of them. And so for some of us, when we look at that, we get inundated and a little bit paralyzed, right? Unable to move forward. So ask yourself one other question is, where should I start listening? You can't possibly begin by listening everywhere. You don't have all of the tools and resources. Doesn't even matter how big your company is. I'm making that statement because there is just so much, right? So choose a place where you believe the majority of your people are talking online or engaging online, and go there first to listen. And again, as you evolve and your social listening grows, you may choose to add different platforms and locations to that listening process. It also helps if you have in your toolkit a list of the words that you're really hoping to pay attention to. So as an example, when the National Institute goes out and does listening around social media and certification, those are two of the key words that we tend to listen for: certification and social media. And the reason that I have both of those and not just certification is because there are certifications for healthcare workers or construction workers or forklift drivers. And those certifications and the conversations happening around those are not relevant to what I can provide as a solution or an option, right? So I have to include both social media and certification. But I might want to also know the words that people would use in exchange of social media. So things like online marketing, digital marketing, those types of things are other keywords that people might use interchangeably with social media. And so if I'm aware of those, that gives me a small palette of things that I can go out and pay attention to. As you're setting up your plan and you're figuring out what it is you want to listen for and where you're going to listen and those keywords, then it's important to assign this to someone. And it might be you. You might be the person in your organization where this goes. But figure out who's going to monitor and how much time they're going to spend monitoring those conversations that are happening. When they're monitoring, there may also need to be a plan for how communication is going to flow within your organization. So the person monitoring may not be the person who should be responding, or may not be the person to compile all the data. They may be just in charge of grabbing that data and giving it to someone else in your team. So what does that look like? And if they do come across a conversation, maybe a question that should be answered best by a sales professional, what is that flow? What's that process to bring them to the right person? If we get somebody who is upset with the organization, how do we adequately get them to customer service? Or who is the best person for them to engage with there? And then when it's appropriate to your goals, join the conversation. And that sometimes is the scariest part, right? We can listen and we can decide how to hand off communications with other people, but sometimes it's hard to say, should I really jump into this conversation? And that's when it's good to know, what is the goal in the first place? What are your organizations trying to do, and how are you wanting to best communicate with people? Because if you think about it as not being in an online technology medium, instead you looked at yourself as being like at a networking meeting where you're in person with people, and you overhear a conversation where people are talking about your brand and they don't have answers to an important question, would you ignore that, or would you introduce yourself and attempt to offer solution? My guess is you would attempt to offer some sort of solution or some information that would be appropriate. That's what we're asking you to think about here in the online sense as well. Technology allows you to be, quote unquote, in the room with your customers, even when it's via technology. Anything to add to that, Rose?
Those are really great points, and especially I like the idea of being in the room. It changes up the dynamic completely, and it helps you become a participant. The flip side of that is to remember that you don't always have awareness of who's in the room. So when you're out there communicating and using a social media platform, you want to remember that anybody could be listening, watching, viewing, thinking. And so again, staying true to your brand message and not just being off the cuff, but really being deliberate in what you say and how you say it is going to really help advance your brand platform.
Absolutely. Excellent point. As we get ready to transition and talk a little bit more about technology, I do want to just remind folks, if you do have a question as you're hearing us talk today, please feel free to throw that into the chat box. There will be some time at the end of our session where we will address questions that you folks have. So please feel free to do that. And Rose, I'll let you take us to the next section.
All right, sounds great. Thank you. So our next topic we're going to move into, and Jen, I think you, let's see. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about technology. And earlier this year, there was a survey that was done with the Public Relations Society of America and the AppRise mobile organization. And so it's fun to have some very current statistics in terms of what's happening with technology. Technology use in 2018, and keep in mind, we are still in Q3. We haven't even moved into Q4 yet, but we have seen a real increase in the use of messaging technologies, everything from texting and WhatsApp to things like Yammer within organizations. That has increased from 14% to 42% in 2018. So we know that quick messaging is a way that people are communicating. Yesterday, I had my car in at the dealership for a fix on a recall. And when I got there, because they had all of my information, I received a text, and throughout my 90 minutes of waiting, I got text updates letting me know what they were doing and when my car was complete. So messaging technology spans everything from me communicating with Jen or someone on my team or my family members to organizations being able to communicate in real time what they are doing. Mobile also has jumped completely, and we all know that we are tied to our phones, so that gives us some pointers. For example, what will fit within a screen? How much of a message does someone see before they choose to open it, or if they choose to open it, or if they choose to delete it? So it reminds us to get the most important information up front and short. It also reminds us that things need to be mobile friendly, and something that is beautiful on a laptop screen may or may not be beautiful on a smart tablet or a phone. And so mobile is another really important use of technology we're seeing that has an impact on brands. Social collaboration, that has risen as well, pretty significantly. There is a lot more going on in terms of how our platforms interact with each other, the ability to post things in multiple places at the same time, as well as for people to share something from one platform to another, and for us to collaborate and have interaction together, whether we're working on a document, whether we're working on a webinar right now from different locations, but together in the same conversation. And then, no surprise whatsoever, social media itself, the usage continues to go up. The platforms are changing. I always find it very interesting that when Facebook came out, it was a college tool, and it was about kids interacting with each other on campuses and with friends. And today, Facebook is much more of a boomers and Xers tool, and my Gen Z son, he's snapping. So social media continues to rise. It's just a matter of knowing which mediums people are using and what purpose they're using them for. We did a survey with a client last week, and we were looking at the way that they use social media personally and the way that they use social media professionally. And no surprises here. Professionally, LinkedIn, Twitter, things like that, that related to connecting with customers or lead generation. Whereas personally, things like Instagram, Facebook, a little bit more of being able to share their lives or connect with friends and family. So it's all going up, and more platforms, well over 3,000, as Jen said, are out there and being used regularly. The other thing that's interesting that came forward in the survey for 2018 is that the spending is going up. So marketing communications professionals that have responsibility for technology budgets and social media budgets are spending more and more on these platforms. They're recognizing that it's a legitimate channel, it's a very helpful channel, and it's a very necessary channel to be able to get your work done. So mobile in particular has had a big rise in spending this year. Analytics, again, one of the cool things about being able to use technology and social media platforms, and maybe I'll chime in here in just a minute, Jen, is the ability to get immediate feedback and analytics. And not that necessarily the numbers that you see that you should be reacting to them, but they do give you a chance to know right away, is something working or not working? Should we wait and see before we change things up? It gives you a very in-the-moment perspective on your communications platform. And then video, I was a little surprised that at the 4%, it seems like maybe that would be bigger, but video remains a very key component. We all know that more than just words, that people like to see images, and that these short videos that people are placing on social media is really helpful to telling that brand story. Jen, any thoughts on the analytics piece or on video?
Yeah, I agree with you in the video piece as far as it being a smaller than I expected number. However, when we think about spending, I believe that companies are also trying to be more I would say careful in how they're doing video, and they're telling those stories in a way that may not cost as much. So they're using more things like Facebook Live or more unpolished, real and authentic video, which isn't as expensive as a traditional television commercial was in the past. So that might be why we're seeing it at such a small number. Although I do believe its use and that storytelling via video is going to continue to grow into the next year. I completely agree with analytics, and people are, although they are often paralyzed by data and the amount of it, there is a lot of people learning how to better utilize that data so that they can spend their money more wisely. And each of your platforms has insights that are available. Google Analytics is a powerful and free tool for our websites to be using, and businesses are slowly starting to understand that and putting more training dollars towards it, but also more money towards hiring people to do the analysis and make those changes more quickly. So I'm not surprised by those numbers, and I expect them in a lot of ways to continue to grow.
And I just saw one question come forward asking about the time span here on the survey. I don't know what the exact span was for the survey, but it was positioned as a very short term, what has changed in very recent years, and it was really looking at, I believe, the first half of 2018, so a relatively short period of time, and I'm not sure how far back or when the last one was. But again, what we are seeing is a rising trend in all of these different areas. So, consumer use and habits. I'm going to go back to the original question that we posed when we started this webinar, and that is, what time is it? Okay, so we have all these bells and whistles and things that we can do, but are we using them? Well, maybe not so much. So today, all of our smart devices, they are capable of cutting edge abilities. They can do pretty much everything for us. In fact, it sounds like, you know, we're going to have driverless cars, we're going to be doing all these different things, but will we? We're going to have the ability to. So smart devices, they have really big abilities for us. Reality though, most consumers are only tapping into the most basic features. So for example, most people are using Alexa to play music, 82%. Or maybe they're using their automated assistant to buy something or order something online, or they're using it to say text gen. So it is funny that while all of these devices can do great things for us, the majority of people, everyday people, are using them for the very basic functionality. And I love this quote. The biggest hurdle for me has been awareness, like understanding what I'm able to do with the devices. So just having a sense of what technology can do for you, how a platform might become a communications channel for you is really important. A few years ago, on a passion project within a nonprofit arena, I started playing around with some different social media platforms, and I didn't know if they were the right ones or not, but the neat thing was it was a chance to try things out in a safe environment and just get a sense for how they worked and whether or not they might be vital not only for that cause, but for other work that I'm doing, or understanding how people might use it. So one of the greatest things that you can do is just try a few things. And you don't have to be able to use all 100 features of a new technology, but try one, get comfortable with it, decide if you like it, try another one, add to it, and just like anything, the more you do it, the more comfortable you become, the easier it is. And then you find that as you move from platform to platform, there are a lot of similarities in terms of how they operate and how to navigate those things. So the big scare of, oh my gosh, I might do something wrong, or I might touch the wrong button, it's a lot easier and safer than you might think. And it's just a matter of getting comfortable in there with it. So we've talked a lot about technology and its prevalence, and we've talked a lot about brand. One of the biggest things to keep in mind is that technology really benefits businesses. In fact, a high percentage of executives believe that their business is going to be disrupted and it's going to feel significantly different because of new technology within the next 12 months. In other words, things are changing so quickly, and disruption is a big buzzword. Disruption is a positive thing. Disruption is something that makes you think differently. If you think back to brand, relevance is one of the key brand words, and so you always want to remain relevant, and to do so, sometimes you have to disrupt what you're currently doing and think in new ways. So we know that technology is going to continue to disrupt the way that we communicate, that social media platforms are going to become more and more significant, and this is a big year for that continued change. And some of the benefits, because of technology and social media, we're able to get our products and services to the market much faster. Remember the days when you had months, years to plan a new launch? Well, today, if your product or service is ready, you can launch it on social media. You don't have to wait for the big trade show in Vegas. You don't have to wait for something to be happening in a bricks and mortar location. You can have that pre-launch, the soft launch, or the full shindig right now, thanks to technology. And people can be in the room or in the store or in with you for that. It also really benefits us because we gain competitive advantages because of the analytics. We can see what's working, we can make real-time adjustments, and we don't have to wait and see. And so technology gives us that insight into what's happening. And it also really streamlines things in terms of being able to get information into the hands of our consumers. Jen, other benefits that you're hearing about or in the work that you're doing with the National Institute for Social Media?
Well, it's interesting that you have mentioned this a couple of times, especially in that example you gave of the company you're working with where the CEO is using his own social media to share out information. I think we're going to see that continue to grow. they know that it's going to disrupt their business, but they're also starting to see a bigger push necessary for executive leaders to get involved and be the people who are willing to do as they say, and be mindful of that. So I think that that's going to come as well, which is going to create a bigger awareness and allow for folks to get more information out in a faster manner, that amplification of having more people talking about the same great message.
Very true. So brand is at the center of communication. It's part of what helps us build all of those important relationships. And remember, it's through the relationships, whether or not an organization, a product, or service has a positive reputation. Reputation is largely formed based on relationships and people's experience with brands. And so technology is giving us a very proactive way to put out positive thought leadership, to really help define and understand what an organization is all about, in particular because it provides this opportunity for our audiences to engage with us. When I think about communication and the different models that are out there, the one that always comes to mind and that social media has really brought to the forefront is the idea that two-way communication is the most effective. We long ago stopped with the one-way, push the message out and just wait and see or expect it to work. Today, because of audience engagement, people have that chance to interact not only with their direct contact within an organization, but also with the leaders that are shaping the vision and delivering on the mission of an organization or a product. It also provides an opportunity for that expertise to filter throughout an organization. So it's no longer just about the top executive being the subject matter expert, and that chances are they may just be the organizational expert, but it then allows for people within organizations to be able to weigh in with specific expertise in their product or service area. So for example, let's say it's a law firm or an accounting firm. You could have messages that are out there talking about what your organization does and about its expertise, but then you could also have somebody talking about tax conformity or talking about changes to the tax code or talking about the importance of succession planning for your organization, and on based on the areas of expertise or even the industries that your organization serves. And so technology, again, is really providing this opportunity to share your brand across social platforms and connect with the audiences that care the most. And as Jen has touched on, and we could do an entire webinar on this, and this might be a great topic for the future, technology and social media allow us to do two things. It allows us to identify and manage issues, keep an eye on what's going on, what's important, what's looming, what could turn into a crisis situation, and hopefully to offset that or to be able to take steps inside to make operational changes before something becomes a problem. And then certainly, should a crisis occur, whether it is a product problem or it's something, it could be a hurricane or something that is beyond our control, it gives us the opportunity to be quick to respond. And as we know, news breaks now on social media. If something happens, chances are someone caught it on their camera phone, they snapped it, they put it on Facebook, they tweeted it, and they're getting that information before or at the same time that news media is. And so organizations need to be really on top of what's happening and be prepared with that proactive issues management program, as well as being able to tap technology and social media to respond to any crisis situations that occur. Jen, any more to add on that point?
You know, I was just going to say, the one thing I think many business owners and even staff at different levels forget is that these conversations, positive and negative, are happening whether or not we're paying attention. And so it's so much better for us to be able to catch these potential issues or crisis situations before they become full-blown challenges to our business that are not repairable. So listening and having a plan in place allow us not only to respond faster, but to be more efficient and to potentially mitigate the issues before they get bigger than what they should. And social media is wonderful in allowing us to identify them. But if we ignore it and say, hey, if I'm not on social, then nobody can get mad at me. Um, if we truly believe that, we've buried our head in the sand, because those conversations are still going to happen, even if we're not paying attention as a brand. So it's important that we at least acknowledge that and then make decisions based on it. So if we choose not to pay attention to it, then that's a choice we need to know we're making. But if we choose to, it has benefits to allow us to respond in a timely fashion.
Definitely. So moving forward, if anything, we hope this morning that we have encouraged you and inspired you to be very curious and to really think future forward. With that mindset, we can allow technology to work for us, even if we're only tapping a couple of the features and benefits of what it can do, or just trying out a couple of social media platforms. We really encourage you to add technology to your next strategy discussion. Bring technology more into that realm of what are the possibilities, how can we tap this, what kinds of things we can do before getting into the tactical decisions of should we be on Instagram, should we be using YouTube more. Think about it from a strategic perspective in terms of what technology can do for your organization and its strategic plan. And then, again, seek out online courses, vendors, events, as many different ways to just stay up on technology. If nothing else, just to get those buzzwords in your brain so that when you hear these in conversation, you can say, I just heard about that. I just read about this. Sounds like you know quite a bit about this. I don't. Can you tell me more? And so taking that self-directed approach to lifelong learning when it comes to technology and social media will serve you well. And then can't emphasize this enough. Start experimenting. Have fun with it. Don't feel like you have to launch this huge, big social media program. Try a pilot program. One market, one product, one initiative, just to build the experience and the trust and to give it a chance to see if it might make sense. And then always, always continue to monitor it, gather feedback, make adjustments. Don't just say, oh, didn't work, stop, but make some tweaks, listen to your audience, and make sure that you're meeting their technology needs. And that's a great place to even begin the process, is just to find out from your audience, what are they using, what do they like to use. I come back to the survey we did last week with a client in asking their sales team what they're using personally and what they're using professionally. Because even though there was not necessarily overlap, it gave us an insight into the idea that they have capacity and experience with multiple platforms. It's just a matter of which ones make sense for which parts of their lives, business or personal. Jen, what do you think?
I am completely in agreement with everything you've said. And I love the fact that you really mentioned the start experimenting, and you said not to just jump in with everything. Take one initiative, one piece, start there, and build from there as you gain experience and exposure to what technology can do.
I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun. Rather than being scared, I'm now of the mindset that it's just a lot of fun to jump in there, try something out, try it on for fit, and either embrace it or move forward to the next one. I know that no matter what, there's always going to be a next one.
Absolutely agree. And I'd love to hear from our audience too in the chat box. What is something you've been hesitant to try that maybe you will give a whirl to here in Q4? What is that piece you've been trying to learn more about?
As you're thinking about those questions, we'll leave you with the idea that technology is going to continue to change. In fact, it's going to continue to change faster than we've ever experienced it. All it means, though, is we simply have new ways of doing things. If you know what it can offer, that's going to serve you more than being worried about not knowing what it can offer. And the more that you stay true to your brand and convey it consistently, go back to that trifecta of distinct, relevant, and consistent on the communications channels that matter most to your audiences, the more that your brand is going to strengthen and the more that you're going to have loyalty from the people who are most important to it. So stay true to your brand, and technology may be consistently changing, but your brand message needs to remain consistent throughout all of that change.
So wonderful. I will take a look at the chat box here to see what anybody has. Thank you again, Rose, for all of your amazing insights. It's been wonderful. And Terrell, I know you asked that question about the survey. We will see if we can find that and email that out when we do email out the recording, which everyone will get because it is important for you to be able to go back and listen if there was something specific that you may have missed. Any additional, let's see here. There's a question that says, do you think there could be a course through NISM on branding, social media, and the use of technology? Lena, that's a wonderful question. We don't currently offer one with all of those three things together. We do talk a lot in our social media strategy around social strategic planning, which does include a content piece around branding and also the identification of different technology. But perhaps Rose and I will have to brainstorm a continuing education option around this specifically.
That would be a lot of fun.
It would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and to be able to break examples.
Yes, break it down, break examples, who's doing it well. See, Terrell also asked a question, how great of a need is it to monitor social algorithms when concerning messages to consumers and customers? If I understand the question correctly, Terrell, you're curious about those algorithms and how different things may be reaching your consumers. I think it's important as a social media or a marketing professional to understand how the algorithms work, because that may influence who or how many people are seeing the posts that you're putting on the certain technology platforms. I wouldn't spend a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out all of the nuances that change very often on each of those platforms. I mean, for example, Facebook made some huge changes late last year in their algorithm, especially as it relates to business pages. But the reality is those businesses who cultivate engagement within their consumers, so for example, they have conversations that are happening between the brands and the consumers, or between the consumers themselves on a brand page. They were not as impacted by that change as those businesses who are simply broadcasting information out and are seeing really low engagement rates. So I think it's definitely valuable to understand them, but I don't know that you should spend hours upon hours making sure you're up with the latest and greatest, because it can be overwhelming to do so and may have very little impact. Rose, how do you feel about that?
I concur completely, and I would say, and it seems like they never cease to stop changing, so just as soon as you figure it out, there is a change that's coming, so use it for in the moment, but don't necessarily use it for long-term decision making.
Absolutely. Well, good. We are coming to the conclusion of our 1 hour. We appreciate each of you for being here and for spending your morning with us. If you have additional questions, all of our contact information is up on the screen right now. We would love to hear from you. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day. And Rose, thank you again for being with us.
Thanks, Jen, so much, and thanks to all for your questions.